The scheme has seen 3.7 kilometres of flood walls and embankments upgraded through Burton, along with a pumping station and a large length of culvert remediation. The scheme has reduced flood risk to over 4,500 residential and 1,000 commercial properties and now gives the town protection from a flood with a 0.5% chance of recurrence in any given year. With a capital construction cost of £22 million, the scheme provides £356 million of economic benefit over the life of the upgraded assets. It safeguards nearly £300 million of spending in the local economy each year, along with 12,500 jobs. The scheme is also helping restore the health of the River Trent and improve local biodiversity.
The defence at Bramall Close is difficult to access for maintenance as it's sandwiched between the Midland Mainline Railway, Tatton Hill Brook and adjacent resident properties. At Royal Lane, the defence is constrained by adjacent properties and a local watercourse. The original flood bank was too steep to maintain safely with obstructions at the toe of the bank. The new defence comprises a sheet pile wall with reinforced concrete cap beam to limit the seepage through the bank and minimise the requirement for any ongoing regular maintenance. The flood bank at Warren Lane had a very narrow crest and shoulders which were too steep for regular grass cutting. The defence is now formed of a line of sheet piles buried under a landscaped embankment.
The original defence at Lansdowne Road had a narrow crest and steep sides, making it unsafe to maintain safely. Constrained by private gardens and the riverside footpath, the new defence comprises a line of sheep piles buried in a landscaped embankment, more in keeping with its open space setting.
At the Severn Trent water outfall between Lansdowne Road and Toad Hole, public safety and maintenance improvements have been provided with the use of stone sets and access steps. The main Toad Hole defence follows the same form as Lansdowne Road, with a buried sheep pile, an improved landscape form with a public footpath along its crest.
At Paget High School, the defence alignment is squeezed between the school playing fields and the River Trent, as well as the Branston Golf Course. The original flood embankment was too steep to maintain safely, and with the school playing pitches protected under the planning legislation, there was insufficient space for a landscaped embankment that is safe to maintain. The new defence comprises a painted sheet pile wall along the school boundary with a landscape bank on the riverward side and a surface public footpath along the top of the defence.
By the Branston Golf and Country Club car park, the new defence is a sheet-piled wall with a landscape bank on the residential side of the sheet pile to maintain the visual amenity from the adjacent properties. Along Foldo Close, the new defence is formed of a brick-clad sheet-piled wall along the dry side edge of the existing flood bank. The pile alignment is carefully located adjacent to buried services and to avoid disturbance to the roots of the adjacent trees.
This section of the defence is pressed between the Regatta Lane allotments and golf course, and its downstream end ties into a network rail embankment. With the original defence too steep to maintain safely and the footprint of the defence constrained, the new defence comprises a sheet pile wall along the allotment boundary to improve security, with a landscape bank with wildflower seeding on the riverwood side adjacent to the golf course.
The original Blackpool Street flood embankment was difficult to maintain with a narrow crest, steep gradients and the landward side of the defence extending into numerous private gardens. The new defence incorporates a buried jagged sheet pile and landscaped riverward embankment face. The boundary between defence and private gardens has now been clearly defined, with the integrity of the defence now unaffected by activities within the gardens.
Works at Green Street included raising a section of existing flood wall and replacing a 40 metre length wall. The design of the wall was based around minimising the size and weight of plant required during construction, and the need to avoid works within the root protection areas of the adjacent trees. The new wall is founded on 8 metre long board piles and is in the form of an inverted T-shaped reinforced concrete wall with brick cladding and a coping stone.
Works to the defences around the library were landscape solutions to minimise visual impact. They included raising footpaths and the top level of the amphitheatre steps. Changing the level of the steps was critical to the drainage of the concourse area, with a risk of surface water flooding the library. The concourse was replaced with granite sets laid to exacting levels.
The original defence of the leisure centre comprised a concrete wall cast against an older brick wall and could not be raised. The new wall is tied to the mass of the existing wall's foundation to minimise cost and carbon, and is formed of a brick-clad L-shaped reinforced concrete wall carefully located to avoid adjacent buried surfaces.
The works at Wetmore Lane comprised the replacement of a single skin brick wall with a brick-clad reinforced concrete wall and embankment works with a sheet-piled seepage cut-off. Under the footbridge over the River Trent, the cut-off is formed of a concrete wall.
This was the most technically challenging section of the works, with a new defence required between the River Trent and the Don Ammett residential park. With the defence alignment on the outside bend of the river, the design included 9 metre long sheet piles to make allowance for future erosion of the riverbank. To avoid the need to relocate residents during construction and manage the risk of bank stability, an advanced silent piling technique was used.
The new defences at Meadow Lane reduced the flood risk from both the River Trent and the River Dove, based on the joint probability events on each river. The original flood embankment had an overly steep riverward face, with its toe in the drainage ditch making it unsafe to maintain. The design enabled the new sheet piles to be installed without removing the original defence to retain the flood protection throughout the construction period. The new defence comprises a sheet piled wall on the landward face of the defence and a landscape bank on the riverward face.
The 3 crescent-shaped ring banks prevent water from the River Trent flowing through culverts under the railway. These assets are difficult to access for maintenance and have therefore had sheet piles installed through their crests to form the structural defence, such that the original earthworks are now just landscaping features with minimal maintenance required. The sheet piles tie into the Midland Mainline Railway embankment at each end, giving 6 tie-in points. Each of these had to be constructed during a carefully planned nighttime rail possession.
The Burton scheme has been instrumental in driving environmental enhancements around the Riverside corridor. The ambitious scale of the enhancements and necessary funding means that this element of the scheme has been taken forward as a standalone sister project. The Burton Washlands is a 630-hectare nature recovery and green infrastructure scheme in an area between the upgraded flood defences and the River Trent, generating £2.7 million in economic benefit in its own right, which has attracted £2.5 million of nature recovery funding. This scheme is now being led by East Staffordshire Borough Council.